trained on being
Well, it was in my childhood days, oh Lord, many long years ago.
Good evening, saints and sinners. I am the Reverend Reginald Cephas Weaver III of the New Jerusalem Missionary Church of God, and I am here to warn you that the end is coming. Turn a button, but don't turn that dial. A reckoning is on its way, and right yet soon. As the judgment comes like a thief in the night, I plead that y'all hearken for your soul's sake to kindle a fire in your heart today, so that the rest of you don't burn tomorrow. From WXTN AM, I bid you all a most blessed welcome to the Judgment Night Radio Hour.
In that little, that one church house, out on a hill.
Good evening, and better welcome, blessed repenters, precious brothers and sisters. I pray ye all offer proper thanks that the day of the Lord hath tarried yet again, that y'all may grace us with your presence once more, and that your aching souls be fed. Indeed, that aching, that twinging, that terrible tenderness inside the troubled spirit of every man beckons at our backs, from within our bowels, from within our bones. As fierce and steady and willful as the revelation itself. In our message this evening, we shall behold just how far whence this beckoning has come, and hence it aims to go. In one fellow, formed in the very image of God, outrun by his own trembling heart. Set yourself to be mindful, and ye who have ears do hear. The subject of tonight's sermon is the son of Adam remembers. The creature scratched up its throat, gathered bile and spit up through a dark sky at its creator. Thunder hadn't rolled till then. A cursed paw depressed the dirt. Then another, then another, then another, then another. For millions of years, until it finally stood up straight, stiffened its haunches and spine, produced the angle at which to keep its eyes to the heaven, and realized what it had done. Then it fell. Its elbows and knees were scraped, shoulders bruised, back bent again. Callousing simian paws trembled digging into the wet dust that it had spent its ancestors' lifetimes crawling out of. Digits gnarling to become fingers, as if to climb against the shadow of its own paradisical blasphemy. It shuddered fearfully and violently, like that, beneath the punishing storm, for a few more millennia grazing against the good ground, tilling it, breaking and bruising its bones to learn again and again how to walk upright. Fast forward several eons, long after this now bipedal beast, slogging through remorse, pulled at its brain and its throat to construct symbols, language, and narrative, and the very act and concept of negation, and then fashioned myths and tales as theories to help it remember the mysterious catastrophe of its guilt. A slender brown-skinned fellow in a suit that would have been considered stylish a generation or two prior is walking along a sidewalk, maintaining a stride to outrun a heavy and lukewarm tingle chaining his veins. The cigarette is helping a little. He shivers and cradles his elbows. Storm is coming. He tries to forget his own name. Maybe if he did, God would too. He sees the place he's looking for, Benny's convenience store, across the street. He doesn't believe he's arrived so fast. He eyes the place 20 minutes, far too long. He spies at it from around corners, from inside alleys along the street, but mostly from beneath already fading shadows. The sky is graying quickly. He paces 8 paces along the sidewalk, then 8 more in the opposite direction, turns his back to the convenience store. There is hardly a crowd in which to blend. He shakes his head and strains his eyes to see through the darkened windows. It's nearly impossible to case the place. He doesn't pray as much as he wants to, because he knows better. Barely unfolding his arms, he slips a hand into his creased jacket, procures a fading brown stocking, and slips it on his head. He resumes his forceful stride, again outrunning himself. His hands fold as he strides. He does not pull out the .32 until he's standing before the cashier. She's brown and freckled and big-eyed, and only her bottom lip quivers. He swears at her loudly and shudders like he's cursed God at the judgment. Her name is Denise, he remembers. He doesn't even remember glancing at her name tag. 5 minutes, was it? He doesn't try to calculate. Doesn't want to. The storm is fully grown by the time he flees. He now has $1,500. That's enough for now. Enough to keep them at bay. He has 48 hours to count it all and call them into hope and to pray. Even though the words fade like smoke in his fevered thoughts, he says them to himself. Hope and pray. Why would he pray? Moreover, why would he hope? This consideration flashes across his consciousness as fast as the incident. Just fast enough to trick himself into not quite remembering. He's several blocks away before he hears anything like sirens. West, then north. He'd taken off the stocking cap 3 blocks earlier. He doesn't know what to do with the gun. Normally he would, but this is not normally. He flops his head to his bed and shakes enough to dry heave, and dares to wonder why. Said slender fellow, in generations-old suit, strides along another sidewalk after the storm is gone. The cigarette helps. He had awoken with a jolt, 3 hours earlier, the cool dark, dampened moonlight riddling his bedroom through the blinds was still enough light to burn his eyes. Once he knew for damned sure he was awake, his chest wouldn't let his body stop moving. So he took a deep breath and raised himself up, clutched a nearly spent, crumpled pack of Newports and proceeded to take a walk. All of this took him about 20 minutes. He did it all without thinking, only feeling. He continues only feeling, letting his gait lift his body along the sidewalk in his lamplit neighborhood, until a ragged creature, gnarled and stinking as ages, accosts him with crooked eyes and crooked, cupped hands. "I ain't got nothing, man," the slender fellow says, before the hunched and shaking creature, old enough to be a ghost, has a chance to unslacken its unshaven jaw and beg. When the slender fellow resumes his stride, it is heavier. He walks past the vagrant, who disappears faster than mist into the darkness, and past the vagrant's eyes, and the trembling strikes him again. A day passes. His heart floats, preparing to rendezvous with those to whom he is indebted. When he lies down, it burns worse, as he remembers why he ever trembled to begin with. He remembers, despite his brain's leaden resistance, settling on his tangled bedclothes and huddling his knee and keeping still so that the grand, hollow, metallic wailing of his compunction might pass over him. He remembers cards, spades, normally, sometimes hearts, occasionally tonk, just as often Texas Hold'em. He remembers laughing when he lost and sighing when he won, instead of cultivating a poker face. He remembers a lucky week about 4 months ago when he paid his rent with 3-card Monte in front of an abandoned storefront tavern turned church. He remembered his dry throat and thick grease under his arms when he drove a Monte Carlo with 10 kilos of yayo in the trunk through 3 states to pay for all those times he lost. He remembers hope, but more than that, he remembers sweet ambition. Another day passes, and he, in darkness, stands before a heathen tribunal of large men in suits more recently and elegantly tailored than his own. He remembers his hands, which he kept close to his center throughout this occult proceeding, no matter how much they moved, being pulled away from him sharply, stretching him, his wrists clasped away from him somewhere in the dark, his ball and sockets loosening. They thank him for his promptness, and his integrity, and his willingness to accept responsibility. They take care amid his pleas to assure him that these proceedings are only to establish and maintain trust regarding said responsibility. He is disciplined and set free. The most expensive black eye and impromptu dental work he has ever had. Fast forward 7 weeks. That felt like 7 days. His face is healed. There's a piece of gold in his mouth. The magnanimity of his employers. The swelling has gone down. He's wearing a different suit. Not much nicer. His mindless, nicotine-powered stride conveys him back to Benny's convenience store. He curses his heart for what comes over him in the ensuing thunder. When he enters out of the rain, he is wisely sans stocking and gun. He buys a pack of Newports, some juicy fruits, chewing gum, and a can of slice. He smiles at Denise and at her eyes that dart from his. He calls her pretty and he means it. She doesn't respond. He pays in a 20 and says,
"You let me take you out tonight and you keep the change."
She scoffs. He says to keep it anyway and smiles his way back to the rain. 2 days, another suit. Not much nicer, but it's pressed this time. No response again. The third time, 2 more days later, he gets a smile, a hint of a smile. 2 more times, a chuckle and a...
Where you trying to go?
I'm just trying not to go to hell.
He doesn't say that, but that's what he means. He takes her to a Thriller and buys her popcorn with butter and a large Sprite. They play pool and drink Budweisers and make love and laugh, share cigarettes and secrets. Not all of them, of course.
When I was 16, I guess 2 months or so after I got my license, I ran over this cat by accident. I cried about it for 2 weeks.
She tells him.
Damn.
He says.
I mean, I would hope it was by accident.
Nigga, hush up.
She says, and slaps him with his own pillow. He chuckles. She doesn't. Her face starts to slowly founder. She swallows a laugh. Then her cheeks and jaw go still. Her lips push out. The bottom lip quivers and shines. His face also gives way, and he says,
I'm sorry.
She turns away and curves in on herself. He spoons her and slides her fists into his hands. She shrinks further, then sinks into him. She weeps.
My brother and my cousins, they would tell me it shouldn't have been running out in the road. Mama said the same thing. It didn't mean nothing, though. I thought the same thing at first. I thought the same thing anyway. But it ain't matter. I just felt bad. I ain't even go back and look when it happened. I was so shook. And I just shook my head and said the stupid little motherfucker shouldn't have run out in the road in the first damn place. And everybody agreed with me. I ain't even have to say that. They all said it for me. But I cried anyway. I just felt so bad anyway. And I couldn't figure out why. I ain't hardly want to drive for 2 weeks, especially not down that road. And I prayed. No bullshit. I actually prayed about it. Over this damn cat. I'm sure it ain't belong to nobody. It ain't have no collar, and this was in Lakewood Heights off Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. You know niggas don't like cats like that. And I thought about it, or prayed about it, whichever. And it came to me. This cat ain't have nobody. Running out in the wild like that? It don't know no better. How a cat supposed to know it ain't supposed to run out in the road? We say shit like that, but we don't be thinking about it. It don't know what a car is. It wasn't doing nothing to me. It ain't have that coming. And even if it did know better, hell, I don't know. All I know is it was just some stupid cat that I was sure wasn't trying to die that night. That was probably out trying to catch a bird or some shit. And I took that away from him. Then tried not to give a damn. That's gotta be fucked up some kind of way.
Maybe you was just thinking about it way too much.
She only responds with a deep, loud breath. Then she says,
Maybe. I don't even like cats like that. God knows I cried for I don't know how long. And I couldn't make no sense of it besides that. So there it is. I ain't never told nobody that. I mean, I tell people about the cat, but not that I was thinking all that stuff. Not that I prayed.
Thunder does not roll again for 2 weeks. The fellow with the suits, the robber, the son of four-pawed Adam, does not tremble again till then. He likes to kiss her freckles. He remembers one night watching her sleep. When he thinks this, he shakes his head violently. It reminds him that he has not been thinking. He tries not to, but he can't help but remember his path. 8 years ago, his dorm room galed by cigarettes and weed, and he's sitting on his bed, biting his lip and staring at a letter he read hours earlier from the school's financial aid office, telling him his grades had gotten too low to maintain his state scholarship. He remembers smiling suddenly amid his contact high, his quiet and slovenly eureka moment. He made $500 his first week dealing to his dorm mates, and another 1,000 the following week from students in the IT club. He shakes his head and almost chuckles when he remembers trying to bribe and then trying to seduce, though he scarcely remembered, knowing that that was what he was doing. The dorm counselor, when she found him out, and showed mercy by merely evicting him from the dorm rooms rather than calling the campus police. He remembers Dorian, the spindly light-skinned man who taught him 3-card Monte that week in March. He was wandering the streets trying to figure out if and how to tell his mother that he had no way to pay for college and nowhere to live while he was attending. With the tan leather jacket, the processed hair, the pencil mustache and the faint pock marks on his cheek, and the slanted smile and the sharp white teeth that he showed when he laughed. He remembers learning quickly, or thinking he did. He rattles his head, trying not to remember the bloody nose he got, or the bruised lip he gave Dorian when Dorian frisked him frantically, saying he pickpocketed his earnings for the night, or conned him out of some heroin money. He remembers laughing with his feet stretched out on the sidewalk. He remembers Dorian giving him a hug and kissing him on the cheek the following evening, and showing all those sharp teeth, as if everything were all right, and actually slipping money from him then in retaliation for the bruises. He remembers finding a baggie of cocaine among the pilfered roll of cash and selling it to some short, jittery white man with a glaring bald spot. He remembers shaking his head even as he realized that he was on to something. He did not bother saying to himself, "Just the one time," or "just till I have enough money," even though it pushed from inside his brain, because his mother had taught him better than that. Denise knows he used to slang. She knows he played cards, sometimes cheats at them. She's all right with that. She wonders, though, why it's so hard for him to get weed now. Whenever she asks about it, he chuckles and says something about the economy, and then kisses her. When they kiss, she likes to lick his gold tooth, even though it makes him shudder, because it's still sore. He never tells her a story. He accounts his past in references, sketches and anecdotes. Once this happened to him. There was that one time when I was a kid this happened. This reminds me of when I was in college.
Man, this one time, this nigga called himself pulling a knife on me. Skinny little dude. I want to say his name was Marvin. I don't remember his name, but I think about how he looks. Nigga just looks like a Marvin. He wanted some rock. Said he'd settle for some powder. But dude didn't have enough to buy that, so I told him to run on with that. Nigga tried to buck. Called himself pulling a knife.
What you mean called himself pulling a knife?
I mean, just what I said.
I mean, he have a knife or didn't he?
I mean, he had one.
Well, he ain't call himself nothing. He pulled a knife on you.
Little ass so-called switch, like, not quite a razor. Like something you cut your nails with.
So? It was a knife.
He wasn't gonna do nothing with that knife.
And you knew that?
Yeah.
And how did you know that?
I knew this dude. The nigga wasn't fixing to do nothing with this knife.
How did you know that, though?
I told you. I knew this nigga.
You knew he had a knife?
No, I mean
So you ain't think he had a knife?
No.
So how you say you know this nigga? What's his name, Marvin?
No, I don't remember his name. I said he looked like a Marvin.
So you ain't even know this dude's name. And you say you ain't know he had a knife, yet you say you knew him well enough to say he just called himself pulling a knife.
I mean, I knew this dude wasn't known for doing nothing like that.
How'd you know? How'd you know this wasn't the day he wasn't fixing to take no shit? He was gonna have his powder hell or high water, nigga.
No, he wasn't gonna do nothing like that.
How'd you know, though?
I just knew.
You ain't just know he was gonna have no knife.
Girl, you crazy. You gonna let me finish the story?
You can, but I know the end. The nigga ain't do nothing. You still here, so I guess you was right.
Oh, my Lord.
I'm just saying. You say he called himself pulling a knife on you like you knew he wasn't fixing to do nothing, but you ain't know he had a knife. You ain't know him then. You ain't know him. You thought you knew him, but you ain't know him.
He didn't mean to give her pieces to put together pictures like that. But that's all he had to do. That was all that she needed. He looked at her one night. She's naked, making a golden brown silhouette in her mirror. He saw her from behind, every round curve and skin shadow and dimple, and from the front, every bleach yellow stretch mark, every modest roll of flesh. Her image seemed to blur whenever his eyes lingered, divided her into odd portions. Her body an entire unrelenting context. He smiled and was about to lecherously laugh the words,
All of you.
out loud, but stopped himself at the thought. Even exposed, she was not cold. Her movements were slow and free, and even as she examined herself, she did so without closing hands. She might as well have been in a warmed blanket. Amid the piecemeal he gives her, these slivers of his life, he contemplates the truth. How much of the whole does he have of her? He must already have her story because he has invaded it. Usurped her authorship. Denise's head is slightly resting on her bare, freckled right shoulder, along with her left hand, when she catches his eyes in the mirror staring at him. She smiles and her teeth glitters. She says,
What are you looking at?
He mouths the word,
Nothing.
but it comes out.
Everything.
She's still coy. She still shakes in her sleep. She still cries.
God damn, he ain't have to talk to me like that.
She says to him. He doesn't say anything. He just holds her.
I knew about that when I started working there, you know? And I thought I'd be able to handle it. I mean, where I'm from, I got cousins and whatnot, friends I grew up with who got caught up running in them streets. My brother been locked up before, and I knew all the niggas he used to run with. I used to run with them sometimes, too. Looking back, I know they wasn't nothing but dumbass chaps who thought they was hard. I thought I had seen some shit in my time. I guess I just told myself I did. I'd heard shit from the fellas, from folks growing up. knew things that went down and knew how the streets was and just told myself I knew what the business was. But not really. Mama worked so hard to keep us from all that, especially me. I guess 'cause I was a girl and she thought I was smart. I don't know though. I thought I'd be able to handle it better.
He nods. He nods and smiles.
I am positive you did.
He wants to say, but knows better. She had told him the story about 2 weeks into their dalliance. She did not look at him while she told it. Once she started, he didn't look at her either.
Something happened to me,
she said. It was a phrase he had heard before from women. He had always found it strange that they said it sometime after he had gotten them into bed. He didn't find it strange this time. He didn't know why. His reflex was the same, though. Worse, even. If she had been looking at him, she would have seen his lips thinned and his throat tightened and his teeth locked and his nostrils slowly flaring, like he was quietly choking, when he was actually slowly sighing. She didn't cry until she had long finished the story.
I was so tired,
she said.
My mind was shut off. I mean, off. I ain't even feel it happen till it was over. I mean, it's like it didn't happen. My mind ain't recognized that it happened till the shit was over. I ain't never had a gun in my face before. Niggas yelled at me like that before. I could handle that. And for real, I wanted to, but it was too late, 'cause it had already happened. The shit he said to me? And he said it so loud, like it was supposed to make me move faster, but it ain't worked for some reason. I mean, maybe it did, but I couldn't tell you. I ain't remember moving till after he left. But the shit this nigga said to me. Like I had done something to him. This nigga has a gun in my face. He mad at me, but I ain't never had a gun in my face before. I ain't never thought I was about to die before. I ain't cry or nothing. Not till a couple days afterwards. Niggas done some messed up shit to me before, said some messed up shit, but I ain't ever thought I was about to die before. I didn't really think so then, not till afterwards. Not till after it was over. He ain't have to say all that awful stuff to me, though. He had the gun already. He could have shot me if he wanted to. He ain't have to do all that.
That was some bitch shit, what he did. He wasn't gonna do nothing.
He doesn't remember saying it while he held her. Only silence. He remembers that weariness under a stern, bright moon. That desperation that whispers like impenetrable reason. Oh, how he does remember. He recalls that too steady and too quiet accumulation of moments. Those slight tilts of his head to the left, where the devil sat on his shoulder. He remembers praying to that God he wasn't even sure he believed in anymore, the cause or the result of his straying. That this or that deal doesn't end with him getting shot in the head or the stomach, or a night or longer in jail. He remembers getting hooked on that dopamine rush of relief each night that he came home safe after a coke deal, or after getting just enough money to pay his rent, or more than enough money to finally take out this or that fine girl with a nice behind. When he remembers this, he starts to wonder whether he kept going because that high was so good. He remembers, yes, he remembers. He remembers suddenly the night he lay in his bed, 3:16 in the morning, and asked himself whether he's going to hell. He can't quite remember, however, whether that moment happened on a Tuesday or a Wednesday or a Thursday night, it being overnight and all. He remembers noticing one Friday afternoon, he remembered it was Friday because he had plans to go to the high tower that night to get drunk or find some women or both, and realizing that he wasn't nervous anymore, rarely got that dopamine shot when safety prevailed or when poverty didn't, but that he was, about 2 years in now? And so now, for all intents and purposes, had made the commitment. Whatever that meant. He decided not to ask what that meant. He had money to get drunk and high and laid and to pay his rent with. And for a nice, warm and windy Friday afternoon, blessed be to God, that was more than enough. He remembers the Sunday night following having a gun pulled on him. He remembers the heavy butt of a revolver. He remembers his flesh torn and red and wet somewhere betwixt his temple and his brow in the corner of his right eye. He remembers vomiting. He remembers stitches from some thick-thighed nurse that he used to sell pills to with a tattoo of 3 black and red roses on her breast. He remembers spending the following fortnight working spades games in a crap house up near Greenville, about 3.5 hours away. He remembers playing 3-card Monte, 8 feet away from Murray Quick Loan and Tax's storefront office about 9 o'clock at night, with an anvil somewhere where his chest and lungs should be, wondering why no one called the cops all night. He remembers finding out why when he got a call the following morning, wondering where all the money from his lost quarry was. He never forgot the owner's name again. He remembers being told that it was a test, the robbery. Some recovering crackhead named Cedric, who was light on his feet, had some skill with a Saturday night special and enough leftover desperation to do foolish and lucrative favors every now and again. He was told he did not quite fail. He remembers a broken pinky and forefinger on his right hand, and surmising that was for cowardice, but that the sparing of his life was for ingenuity. He remembers reckoning that his test grade came out to about a C. He remembers that evening at about 6:30, going to Benny's convenience store and buying a pack of Newports. He remembers struggling to hold a cigarette in his casted fingers, testing further his addiction's earned adeptness. His hand trembled in frustration, and he dropped it several times. But he remembered when it finally lit, the cigarette helped. He remembers slanging for about 3 more months after that, mostly marijuana. He was no longer trusted with cocaine. He remembers being fairly comfortable with that situation. He remembers playing spades in the back of a bar, owned by an old customer, in order to win some extra pocket change. He remembers losing. He remembers not having the money to lose with. He remembers paying in weed. He remembers doing this Friday and Saturday night. He remembers trying to cheat his way into winning the weed or its worth in cash back on Sunday night, and not being able to out-renege either his partner in the game, a sniveling little nigger who called himself Trevor the Truth, or their opponents, and losing again. He remembers vomiting, 2,500 in the hole. He remembers a bloody nose and more than a few bitch slaps and a sore gut and doubling over in a puddle of pissy muddy rainwater in an alley next to his apartment. He remembers a calloused white hand on his face and hot breath in his ear, whispering that he had 2 weeks, and feeling the first shot of dopamine relief in over a year at the pleasant surprise that he was given that long to repay his debt. He remembers not having the stomach to play 3-card Monte in front of storefronts for the first week. He remembers skipping town the Tuesday of the second week. He remembers rubbing sore fingers on his right hand while staring at the 32 he sometimes reluctantly carried back when he was slinging cocaine. He remembers thinking he could sell it or do something else. He remembers jumping from his bed and pacing his apartment and looking out his window and lighting his last Newport and wondering how much this 32 would sell on the street, and then deciding on something else. He remembers thinking that the cigarette helped. He prays. He prays because he feels sick. He feels hollow and moist in his belly. He feels great big stones in the back of his head. He's always tired. He and Denise hook up 3 times a week. She still doesn't want to call him her man yet. He says it's all good. She says, He has no food in his apartment. He lives off the scraggly noodle and McDonald's diet of his college days. Cards can pay the rent, though. He's waiting on the call to say he can sling again. The first night Denise cooks for him, he wonders if she's going to get on his case about getting a real job.
If you this broke, that must mean you stopped trapping for real. I guess that's supposed to be good.
She laughs.
Baby, I got you.
She makes baked Alfredo chicken and broccoli. One night he calls her, and she thinks he's trying to get her to come over. She's willing, but he says,
Denise, what are we doing?
He hears her smile over the phone. She says,
Nigga, you for real? I thought we was just kicking it.
I just wanted to make sure is all.
He says.
Make sure for what?
Says Denise, her smile still audible.
Just make sure, I ain't trying to hurt you.
Nigga, how you gonna hurt me?
I don't know, girl. I'm just trying to do right by you.
Look at you. You catching feelings?
He smiles. It's involuntary. He's not sure why. He reckons his smile is also audible.
Girl, you coming over, ain't you?
While he's waiting for her to arrive, he prays again. He has forgotten how by this point, but he knows to call it praying, because he asks,
What the hell am I doing?
Aloud, to no one who is physically present. When he says, hell, it is not an idle curse. That night, after they are done, he looks into her eyes and says,
I love you.
It was not sudden for him, but his eyes still widen after he says it. He doesn't stutter. The words, resonant, crawl out of his throat like a raw-boned thief. Denise's face crumbles, almost apart, and she tilts her tired head and says,
What?
He actually repeats the words. This time he stutters, but not much. She sighs, smiles, shakes her head slowly. She settles his face in her hands and softly kisses his mouth, as if to prevent any more thieves from creeping out. The next morning is sweet and tender. Denise does not return the words, but she caresses his face more than she ever has before. They agree to meet again the following weekend. He applies for a job as an administrative assistant at Murray's Quick Loans. The manager laughs. The pagan tribunal arranges a cumbersome desk gig based on the business degree that he was supposed to have earned once upon a time. He answers phones and files papers and arranges client appointments, occasionally interviews people to sign up for loans. Every now and again someone comes in that he recognizes. Some big, bulky Negro who gave him a bruise or broke his fingers. Someone who assigned him a house at which to sell cocaine. Another weed man. He always just nods. He now makes enough to both pay rent and to buy groceries. Denise still cooks for him, but she still hasn't said, "I love you." He wonders if she sees other men. He doesn't think so, and his heart tightens at the intrusive image of her under some other man, but also at the thought of asking. He thinks about rights. One weekend together, sharing Budweisers and cigarettes in secret, he says,
"I love you,"
again. And she shakes her head and does not laugh this time.
I don't know what you want.
When he prays, he asks, presumably God, questions he has heard women ask before. Questions like, "What am I looking for?" But he had answered that himself months ago when Denise asked him where he's trying to go. He remembers the first night after that night. He remembers that aged vagrant. Where was he trying to go? As he wonders why, he remembers this. Why this image? But something in his crag-ridden chest cavity told him something that he interpreted as, "Don't question this." That vagrant looked so old and worn by something meaner and heavier than merely time. He never remembers the words he screamed at this pretty, freckled brown girl who happened to be working the register that night he decided to force his way out of desperation by any means necessary. He doesn't remember the dopamine rush he reckoned he might get after it was all over, and he had the money to pay his debt, and he hadn't been caught by the police or any such thing. He remembers her lip, though. Just one lip, full, the line of the glare on the hot pink lipstick, shaken like water, while it quivered. She did not move otherwise. Denise has not remembered what else she had done that night. He knows this because she told him, shivering and curled up, naked in his arms, wondering what got her there, what she did to deserve it. He remembers a dark sky. There is no moon, so there is no light, and the glass on his window feels chilled. He feels her behind him, staring at him, lying on the bed several paces from the window. This tickles his belly, and then his veins. He laughs, and the laughs echo out into the night, radiating his whole block. She laughs with him. Cigarettes and secrets. It's late, and tomorrow is Sunday. He interrupts his laugh to take a deep breath, and he lumbers carefully back to his bed, back to where Denise waits for him, laughing with him and shaking her head. And she's lying there, sprawled and half prone, with her bare, rounded haunches raised, writhing and spent like her sacrificial cat. And she reaches out to him and summons him hither with wriggling fingers as he approaches. He steps closer, lets her fingers guide his gait toward the bed. He's staring back.
Everything,
he says. He lifts, then lowers his knee to get on the mattress, lets her pull him into the bed and into her. The fourth time he told her,
I love you.
She still would not return the phrase, but she looked deeply into his eyes and approached him like she wanted to hold him. When she lifted the 32 to his face, he felt his bottom lip quiver. He doesn't remember her saying,
Motherfucker.
but he read that pouty bottom lip pretty well. He remembered the great dark tribunal of heathen men, and he remembered their wise and meticulous mercy. Maybe it wasn't karma or God.
Maybe it was just me.
He said as he blared to himself.
Maybe that's what came over me when my heart fluttered at her smile and stopped shaking before, even when she sniffed her way to my closet, saw in a heap, stinking like my delayed repentance. The suit that was elegant a generation or two ago.
He didn't say that, but that's what he meant. The bullet in his knee and the one 2 inches beneath his groin didn't distance him from the heartache after she left, or the noise of the storm outside. But the cigarette helped. To the dust we shall return, and the darkness and the depths of that dust we must remember, if we are to discern the whirls and wiles of our wicked hearts, and the whirled and wandered roads to which they lead, as they have done indeed since we were formed in the dirt. As was revealed to our fated son of Adam all too well, and to his precious Denise, whose road he unduly knotted along his way. Those roads wind into and out of and along other roads. Heed not this remembrance, and that narrow road unto salvation shall be tangled and twisted, till only a grace that burns deep and burns slow can hope to untwine you. But untwine you it shall, racking and renting, till the judgment comes. We most eagerly look forward to you gracing us again next evening, here at a little church, up on a high hill, right off a dirt road, just on the outskirts of eternity. If the Lord wills it, and the creek don't rise. From WXTN AM, this is the Reverend Reginald Cephas Weaver III of the New Jerusalem Missionary Church of God, telling you to beware and be wary.
In that little that one church house out on a hill.
Thanks for listening to the Judgment Night Radio Hour. The Judgment Night Radio Hour is produced by Skyler Q. Andrews and Samuel W. Ellis, and stars Skyler Q. Andrews as the voice of Reverend Reginald Cephas Weaver III. Tonight's episode was the short story, A Son of Adam Remembers, written by Skyler Q. Andrews and directed by Samuel W. Ellis. Tonight's episode featured the voices of Sydney Fowler as Denise and Skyler Q. Andrews as the Son of Adam. Music on tonight's episode included Peace Ball and 7 Downs by Gospel of Mars and Aniva Rock Lighthouse by Roger Plexico, all used under an attribution non-commercial license. To support our show on Patreon, visit www.patreon.com/Judgment Night Radio. If you like our show, don't forget to rate and review us on iTunes, which helps more people discover us. And feel free to listen to us wherever you enjoy podcasts, including Google Play, Stitcher, and TuneIn. Contact us at judgmentnightradio@gmail.com. You can find us on Twitter at twitter.com/jnightradio, on Facebook at facebook.com/judgmentnightradio, and visit our website at www.judgmentnightradio.com.